The young woman walked down the narrow street, the evening sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Her hands clutched the old worn case that held her beloved instrument. She had carried it with her through years of practice, through every moment when the world seemed to doubt her, and now it felt heavier than ever. The community hall where the music event was held appeared in the distance. Lights flickered through the windows, and she could hear faint sounds of conversation and laughter, the kind that made her stomach twist. She had been here once before, many months ago, and the memory of judgment still lingered. People had glanced at her with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Some had whispered, some had chuckled quietly when they thought she couldn't hear. Tonight, she hoped it would be different. But a part of her braced for the same mockery. She adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath. The hall was buzzing with energy, performers preparing, tuning their instruments, laughing with friends and supporters. She could feel the contrast between herself and the others. Some were dressed in expensive suits or elegant dresses. Their instruments gleamed under the lights, polished and new. She carried her old instrument carefully, knowing it had more soul than shine. The weight of her years of practice was in each scratch, each mark on the wood. She had saved up and repaired it many times. Each repair was a reminder of her persistence, but she knew no one would see that. To them, it would just look like an old, beaten instrument. As she stepped through the doorway, she immediately felt the eyes on her. Some were curious, some were amused. A few children stared openly, tilting their heads, whispering to each other. Adults whispered too, and a soft laugh came from a corner where a group of performers were sitting. They didn't know her, didn't know her story, didn't know the countless hours she had spent alone in her room practicing, learning, and sometimes crying because progress was slow. They only saw a quiet, unassuming young woman with a slightly tattered case, and they judged her. She moved through the room, trying not to let the glances and whispers reach her. Each step was careful, deliberate. She found a corner to place her instrument and bag. The case thumped softly as it hit the floor, and she kneeled beside it, running her fingers over the worn surface. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. She could feel the energy of the room, the anticipation, the nervous excitement, and the unspoken competitions that seemed to hang in the air. Every performer wanted to impress. Every observer wanted to compare. And she, standing quietly in the corner, felt the weight of being underestimated before she even began. From her place, she could see the stage. It was modest, a small raised platform, but the lights made it look significant. She had performed in small venues before, in front of teachers, friends, and sometimes strangers. But this felt different. Here, the stakes were higher, the judgments more immediate. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and anxiety. Her heart beat faster, but she tried to calm it with thoughts of preparation. Every day for years, she had practiced scales, arpeggios, songs that challenged her fingers and her mind. Every mistake had been a lesson, every success a quiet triumph. And now, she needed to carry all of that experience into a room full of people who had already decided she might not be good enough. A group of performers approached her corner. Glancing at her case with thinly veiled amusement, one of them smirked, raising an eyebrow. "Is that old thing really yours?" They asked casually, but the tone carried the weight of mockery. Another nodded, whispering something that made the first person laugh quietly. She felt the burn of embarrassment rise, but forced herself to look up calmly. "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady. She didn't add anything else, because she didn't need to explain years of dedication to strangers who weren't ready to understand. The conversation moved on, but she could still feel the eyes, the quiet judgment that hovered in the air. She reminded herself that she had faced this before and had come out stronger. She had learned that mockery often came from ignorance, from people who hadn't yet seen the truth of what someone could do. She bent down to open her case, checking the strings, adjusting the small details she always attended to before performing. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, each touch a ritual that reminded her of the countless hours she had spent learning, perfecting and mastering her craft. Time passed quickly, though she barely noticed. Performers went up on stage one after the other. Some played beautifully, earning applause and nods of approval. Others stumbled, earning quiet sighs or polite claps. And through it all, she remained in her corner, waiting, observing, preparing. She watched how the audience responded, how people shifted in their seats, how some leaned forward to catch every note, while others talked quietly to one another. She learned to read the room, to see the patterns, the expectations, and the subtle biases that guided people's judgments. Her turn approached, and she felt the familiar flutter of nerves. She took another deep breath, feeling the weight of anticipation settle on her shoulders. She stood, picking up her instrument with care. Each step toward the stage was a reminder of everything she had endured. She could hear a few whispers, a small chuckle here and there, the unmistakable sounds of doubt. But she held her head high, refusing to let their opinions define her. She was not the sum of their judgment. She was the sum of years of dedication, of quiet resilience, music that had grown from her soul. As she stepped onto the stage, the lights brightened, and for a moment she felt the room shrink around her. The faces in the audience blurred slightly, but she saw the expressions of curiosity, amusement, and doubt. She placed her instrument carefully, adjusting the position to feel comfortable. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself, letting the familiar energy of preparation wash over her. Every note she had ever practiced, every melody she had ever learned, every emotion she had poured into music, all of it came together in this moment. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling the silence that had settled in the room. The chatter faded as people turned their attention toward her. Some still whispered, some still doubted, but the room had shifted slightly. She could feel it. The anticipation was thick, like a tangible force pressing against her. But instead of fear, she allowed it to sharpen her focus. She placed her fingers on the instrument, feeling the familiar textures. The tension of the strings, the readiness of every key, every surface she had learned to master, and then she took the first breath, the one that would carry her into the music. She reminded herself that this was her moment, not theirs. Their judgment did not define her worth or her skill. Every sound she produced, every note she played, was a reflection of her journey, her perseverance, and her heart. She lifted her instrument, ready to let the music speak before words could. The room held its collective breath, some out of curiosity, some out of skepticism, and she allowed herself a small, confident smile. This was the beginning, and nothing that had come before mockery, doubt, whispers, or laughter could touch the truth of her music. Tonight, she would play. She would let the notes tell the story that had been waiting inside her all these years. She sat in her corner after setting down her instrument, trying to calm the flutter in her chest. The room was alive with chatter and movement. Some performers were tuning their instruments, their fingers moving quickly, testing every note with precision. Others were laughing together, swapping stories of past performances and small victories. She observed quietly, letting herself become a part of the scene without really joining it. The energy around her was intoxicating, yet also overwhelming. Every glance in her direction carried a subtle judgment, and she could feel it pressing down, like a weight she could not ignore. A group of young performers, dressed in neat, colorful outfits, moved past her. One of them looked at her case and whispered something that made the others snicker. She could hear the faint words, and though they were muffled, the tone was unmistakable. She felt a pang of irritation, but also a deep, quiet resolve. She had learned early on that people would always judge what they did not understand. The true measure of a person was not in the opinions of strangers, but in the work they put into their craft, and the courage to keep going despite doubt. Her thoughts wandered to her past. She remembered the first time she had picked up this instrument, how awkward her fingers had felt, how clumsy the sounds were. She had cried many times in frustration, wishing she could learn faster, wishing she could be like the others who seemed to glide through music effortlessly. But she had continued, day after day, hour after hour, building skills slowly, learning patience, and discovering the subtle joys in small improvements. Every scar, every worn spot on her instrument was a testament to her dedication, a mark of her journey that no one else could see. The murmurs and laughter continued around her, but she focused inward, letting the familiar rhythm of preparation settle her nerves. She ran her fingers over the strings gently, adjusting them as she always did. She tested a few notes, letting the sound fill the space around her. The room was noisy, yet somehow she could hear the clarity in each tone, the subtle imperfections that she had learned to correct. She reminded herself that the music did not belong to the audience, it belonged to her. The joy, the challenge, the discipline were all hers, cultivated over years of dedication. A woman walked by, glancing at her with polite curiosity. "Are you performing tonight?" she asked. The question was simple, yet the tone held a hint of doubt. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes," she replied. She didn't offer excuses. She didn't justify herself, because she didn't need to. The woman nodded slowly and moved on, perhaps reassured, perhaps still uncertain. The young woman returned to her corner, taking deep breaths, feeling the tension in her shoulders slowly release. Time moved steadily, performers taking the stage one by one. Each performance brought its own reactions from the audience, some applause, some polite claps, some quiet nods. She watched carefully, noting the way the crowd responded to different styles and techniques. She noticed how people leaned forward for performers they admired, how they whispered or shifted in their seats for those they underestimated. It was a subtle dance of judgment and expectation, and she absorbed it silently. Every glance, every expression, every sound in the room became part of her understanding, a map of the environment she was about to enter. One performer before her had an elaborate setup, multiple instruments, and a flashy costume. The crowd responded with audible approval, clapping and cheering. She felt a flicker of envy, quickly followed by self-awareness. This was not about competing with others. Her journey was her own, and she had something unique to offer. She reminded herself that the beauty of music was not in showiness or spectacle, but in authenticity and connection. The small, intimate moments that touched hearts mattered more than the loud applause of the crowd. The whispers continued, quieter now, but persistent. A few people speculated about her abilities, some clearly doubting that she could produce anything remarkable. She could feel the sting, but she had learned to transform doubt into focus. She ran through the melodies she had prepared, visualizing each note, imagining the sound as it would resonate through the hall. Her fingers tingled in anticipation, ready to move with precision and feeling. She drew on the memory of every quiet practice session, every night spent alone with her music, every moment of struggle that had strengthened her. A friend who had come to support her arrived quietly, standing at the edge of the room. Their presence was comforting, a reminder that someone believed in her, even when the rest of the room did not. They offered a small smile, a silent gesture of encouragement, and she felt a surge of gratitude. It was not about the approval of the crowd, but about staying true to herself, about honoring the work she had put into this journey. She felt a renewed sense of determination, knowing that when it was her turn, she would give everything she had. She noticed a few older members of the audience, people who had seen many performances and knew the nuances of musical expression. They glanced at her with curiosity, perhaps recognizing something in her stance, her focus, or the way she held her instrument. Their presence reminded her that not all judgment came from ignorance. Some came from understanding, from a deeper awareness of what it took to perform well. She felt a quiet reassurance, knowing that her efforts might be recognized by those who truly understood the art of music. Minutes stretched, each second bringing her closer to her turn. The anticipation was intense, yet she felt a growing calm within. She reviewed her mental checklist: position, posture, breathing, the sequence of notes. Her mind was a quiet space, focused entirely on preparation. She could still hear whispers, small murmurs of doubt and curiosity, but they no longer rattled her. She had learned to filter noise, to draw strength from within. And now she could feel the power of that discipline. A young child ran past, glancing up at her with wide eyes. There was no judgment in that gaze, only curiosity and innocence. It made her smile softly. Music was universal, and the connection it could create transcended appearances, clothes, and age. She thought about all the moments when music had been a lifeline, a source of comfort, a companion in solitude. She felt a deep gratitude for the instrument she carried and the voice it gave her, a voice that had waited patiently for this moment. The room shifted as a new performer took the stage. drawing attention and applause. She observed quietly, letting the rhythm of the event guide her understanding of timing, atmosphere, and audience engagement. She could sense the ebb and flow of energy, the subtle reactions that would inform her own performance. Every detail mattered, the way people held their breath, the expressions that crossed their faces, the small involuntary gestures that betrayed attention or distraction. She absorbed it all, storing it in memory, preparing for the moment she would step forward. Her heart pounded with anticipation. But it was tempered by the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of practice. She remembered every difficult moment, every lesson learned, every time she had persevered when others doubted her. She felt a surge of pride, not arrogance, but a recognition of the effort and dedication that had brought her here. She was ready, not for approval, but for expression, for the chance to let her music speak for itself. The whispers of doubt grew softer as more performers finished their pieces. Some audience members began to look around, curious about who would go next. She felt the shift, the subtle turn of attention toward the stage. The moment was approaching, and she allowed herself a final deep breath. She placed her fingers gently on her instrument, feeling the familiar texture, the readiness of every string, every key. She felt the rhythm of her own heartbeat align with the rhythm of the room, a quiet harmony that centered her in that moment. She realized something important. The mockery and doubt had no real power unless she allowed it. Her skill, her preparation, her authenticity, these were her strengths. The whispers could not diminish the years of effort, the nights of dedication, the quiet victories no one else had witnessed. She had already earned something far greater than applause, the knowledge that she could rise above judgment, that she could remain true to herself, and that her music had value simply because it was born from her heart. The minutes felt like hours, yet finally the announcement came. She was next. The young woman stood, lifting her instrument carefully, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. Each step toward the stage was deliberate, grounded in years of practice and quiet confidence. She could feel the eyes on her again, the whispers, the lingering doubt. But she moved forward with a steady pace, her mind focused, her heart open. The anticipation of the audience, the tension in the room, the judgment she had endured, they all faded as she approached the moment where her music would begin, a moment that belonged entirely to her. She stepped onto the small stage, the soft lights illuminating her figure. The audience's murmurs seemed to fade as her presence filled the space. She positioned her instrument carefully, adjusting it until it felt just right. The familiar touch of the strings under her fingers sent a wave of comfort through her. The years of practice, the countless hours spent alone, all converged in this moment. She took a deep breath, centering herself, focusing on the sound she was about to create rather than the judgments around her. For a moment, she let her eyes drift across the audience. Faces blurred into a sea of expectation, curiosity, and subtle doubt. Some leaned forward in anticipation, others whispered quietly to neighbors, exchanging glances that held disbelief. Yet, she felt no fear. Instead, she felt a strange calm, a clarity born of knowing that her music, her effort, and her heart were the only measures that truly mattered. She raised her instrument gently, and the first note sounded. It was soft, delicate, precise, carrying the weight of years of discipline and emotion. A hush fell over the audience. Those who had whispered moments ago froze, caught off guard by the purity and control of the sound. The young woman's fingers moved with grace, guided by muscle memory and intuition. Each note flowed naturally, yet every gesture carried intention, subtlety, and emotion. She felt herself becoming one with the instrument, the music rising from within her, filling the hall with tones that were at once simple and profound. She noticed the change in the audience, the slight shift in posture, the widening of eyes, the subtle lean forward of people who had doubted her. She continued, weaving the melody carefully, transitioning between notes with precision and feeling. Memories of late nights practicing, correcting mistakes, and pushing through frustrations surfaced, lending depth to her performance. Every movement of her hands and every note resonated with authenticity. The music was not just skill. It was a story a reflection of struggle, perseverance, and quiet triumph. And as she played, she could sense the initial skepticism of the room beginning to dissolve. A few performers in the audience, those who had glanced at her case earlier with amusement, now watched in stunned silence. Their whispers had ceased, replaced by attention and focus. She felt no satisfaction in their surprise, only a deep awareness of the power of patience and dedication. Years of preparation had led to this moment, and it was unfolding exactly as it should. She allowed herself a subtle smile, not out of triumph, but out of recognition of the beauty of the music and the journey that had brought her here. The melody grew richer, more complex as she drew upon her memory and practice. Each phrase was deliberate, each note an expression of emotion carefully crafted through experience. She played with feeling, letting the music convey what words could not. She remembered moments of doubt, moments when she questioned her ability, moments when the world seemed indifferent. And now the music carried those moments, transforming them into sound that touched the audience in ways that were invisible yet undeniable. She noticed a few elderly audience members who had seen many performances over the years. They watched intently, their eyes reflecting appreciation and understanding. They had learned to recognize genuine skill and emotional depth, and she felt a quiet acknowledgement pass between them and her music. Their presence reminded her that authenticity could not be faked, that true dedication always left traces visible to those who could see beyond appearances. The realization strengthened her resolve. Guiding her fingers and heart as the performance continued, the hall itself seemed to respond to her music. The small space, previously buzzing with chatter and movement, now held a stillness that seemed to embrace her sound. Even the background noises, the creak of chairs, the faint rustle of clothing seemed to vanish, replaced entirely by the clarity of the melody. She felt herself transported, no longer aware of the judgments that had greeted her arrival. The music was no longer just for the audience. It was a conversation between her and the world, a declaration of presence and mastery. She shifted into a softer passage, a sequence that required subtle touch and attention to detail. Her fingers danced lightly, guided by instinct and practice, producing sounds that were delicate yet resonant. The audience leaned in, some mouths slightly open, all attention fixed on the unfolding performance. She could feel the change in energy, the transition from doubt to engagement, from curiosity to admiration. Even those who had initially mocked her could no longer look away. They were drawn into the music, unable to ignore the undeniable skill and emotion behind every note. As she continued, she recalled her earliest lessons, the long afternoons of repetition, the frustration of mistakes, and the exhilaration of small victories. Every memory shaped the music she now played. The melody told a story not of perfection, but of perseverance and growth. It carried the quiet victories of countless hours of work, the resilience that had allowed her to continue despite skepticism, and the authenticity that came from dedication to craft. She could feel the audience responding not just to the sound, but to the presence, the honesty, and the effort that each note represented. The music built toward a crescendo, a combination of technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers moved with confidence and precision, each note striking with clarity. She felt her own heartbeat sync with the rhythm, a perfect harmony between performer and instrument. The audience sat in rapt attention, some visibly moved, others nodding subtly in appreciation. The initial whispers and laughter were gone, replaced by focused silence, a testament to the power of music to transform perception and command. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, feeling gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the people who had doubted her, the moments of isolation, the small victories that had gone unnoticed. All of it had shaped her, strengthened her, and prepared her for this moment. She realized that respect was not given automatically. It was earned often quietly and patiently through dedication and courage. And tonight, the music itself was the vehicle through which that respect would emerge. The final section of the piece required both technical mastery and emotional expression. She approached it with calm determination, focusing on precision while allowing feeling to guide her. Each note was deliberate, each transition carefully considered, yet infused with the natural flow of instinct and emotion. She felt the music building, growing in intensity, pulling the audience along, creating a shared experience that transcended skepticism, doubt, and expectation. The performance had become a dialogue, a subtle exchange between her and everyone present, an unspoken understanding that skill and dedication could not be denied. As she neared the conclusion, she allowed herself a subtle flourish, a demonstration of both technical skill and expressive nuance. The room responded with audible shifts, soft gasps, and widened eyes. The change was evident. Mockery had given way to respect. Doubt had been replaced with attention. Curiosity had transformed into engagement. She felt a deep satisfaction not from the audience's reaction, but from the realization that the music had fulfilled its purpose, conveying her story and truth in a way that words never could. Finally, she reached the last notes, letting them resonate fully, filling the hall with sound that lingered in the air. She held the final note, feeling the vibration, the power, and the emotion it carried. The room was silent for a brief, suspended moment, as if holding its breath, acknowledging the completion of something remarkable. In that stillness, she felt a profound connection to everyone present, a recognition that music had transcended appearances, expectations, and initial judgments. The journey from being underestimated to commanding attention had been long, but it was reflected in every sound that now hung in the air. She lowered her instrument gently, allowing the final vibrations to fade naturally. Her fingers lingered on the strings for a moment, savoring the resonance, the energy of the performance, and the quiet triumph it represented. She looked up at the audience, seeing their expressions now transformed, eyes wide with appreciation, nods of respect, small smiles of acknowledgement. The subtle shift in perception was clear. She had not only played music, she had changed the narrative, turning initial doubt into admiration. The power of authenticity, patience, and dedication had been demonstrated in the most tangible way possible through the music itself. She felt a wave of calm wash over her. The journey of being underestimated, of facing mockery, had culminated in this moment. The respect she had earned was not just from the audience, but from herself, for having remained true, for having persevered, and for allowing her passion to shine despite the doubts of others. She knew that the experience would stay with her, a reminder that effort, patience, and authenticity were forces far stronger than initial judgment or skepticism. The performance had reached its end, but the impact lingered. The hall seemed to hold the memory of every note, every gesture, and every moment of quiet intensity. She stepped back slightly, taking a breath, and allowing herself to feel the satisfaction of having expressed her truth. The first note had changed everything as she had anticipated, but the journey of the performance had transformed not just the audience, but also herself. She felt a sense of completion, of fulfillment, knowing that she had given everything she had, and that the music had carried her story, her struggle, and her triumph to those who were willing to listen. She continued to play, her fingers moving with a combination of precision and emotion that captivated the audience. Each note seemed to carry a story, a journey of quiet struggle and perseverance. The room, once buzzing with whispers and judgments, had grown still, listening intently. The subtle skepticism that had followed her from the moment she entered the hall had begun to disappear, replaced with focused attention. People leaned forward, some with wide eyes, others with slight nods, all drawn into the unfolding performance. She could feel the energy shifting, the room becoming a space where the music, rather than appearances, mattered. Her mind remained focused on the melody, allowing her emotions to guide the flow of her fingers. The music was no longer just a series of practiced notes. It had become a dialogue, a conversation between her and the audience. She felt the weight of their attention, but instead of pressure, it fueled her determination. Every subtle variation in tone, every soft passage, every rising crescendo was deliberate, designed to carry the listeners through a journey of feeling and understanding. The earlier mockery seemed distant now, almost unreal. As the authenticity of her performance filled the room, a few audience members exchanged glances. the initial amusement replaced with awe. Those who had once whispered or chuckled now sat silently, captivated by the beauty and depth of her music. Even the performers waiting for their turn seemed drawn in, momentarily forgetting their own preparations. She noticed subtle expressions of surprise and admiration, kind that comes when someone witnesses skill and emotion that surpass expectations. It was not just technical mastery that had captured their attention, but the soulfulness that resonated from her performance. She allowed herself a brief moment to feel gratitude for the instrument she had carried for so many years. Its worn surface, the subtle scratches and dents, each told a story of dedication and love for her craft. She had spent countless hours nurturing it, maintaining it, and learning to communicate through it. Now, it responded perfectly to her touch, amplifying the emotions she poured into each note. She realized that the connection between performer and instrument was something few could understand fully. But it was evident in the power of the sound filling the room. The melody shifted, becoming more intricate and layered. She navigated the changes with skill and sensitivity, aware of the audience's reactions with each phrase. Some eyes glistened with emotion, others widened in appreciation, while a few leaned forward as if trying to catch every nuance. She had anticipated this response, knowing that music had the power to transform perception. It could turn doubt into admiration, skepticism into respect, and it was doing so now. The room was no longer judging her. It was absorbing her. Performance with genuine engagement. She reflected briefly on the years of preparation that had led to this moment. The long nights alone, the frustration of mistakes, persistence through doubt of it, had culminated in a performance that was more than just sound. It was expression, storytelling, and proof of resilience. Every note she played carried the weight of her journey. She felt the audience recognizing that truth, even if only subconsciously. She did not seek validation, but the respect she was earning felt like a quiet acknowledgement of the dedication. She had poured into her craft. A few performers in the back, who had initially looked down on her, now seemed genuinely impressed. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the skill and emotional depth she displayed. She felt no need to gloat. Her focus remained on the music. She knew that true respect could not be forced. It had to be earned through authenticity and consistent effort. And in this moment, the music itself was speaking on her behalf, bridging the gap between doubt and recognition as she continued. As she noticed the subtle rhythm of the audience's engagement. Some leaned in, fully immersed, while others moved slightly in their seats, unable to contain their appreciation. She allowed herself to feel the connection forming, a quiet but powerful link between performer and listeners. The music carried more than melody. It carried meaning, emotion, and the story of perseverance that had defined her journey. Each note built on the last, creating layers of sound that were both technically impressive and emotionally resonant. The middle section of the piece was particularly challenging, requiring dexterity, precision, and sensitivity. She navigated it with care, each transition smooth, each note intentional. She felt the music flow through her, a combination of skill and instinct honed over years of practice. The audience remained captivated, their focus unwavering. She could sense their collective admiration growing, their skepticism fading completely. What had begun as curiosity and doubt had transformed into respect and engagement. A testament to the power of patience, dedication, and authentic expression, she allowed a softer passage to emerge, a delicate moment that demanded attention to subtlety. Her fingers danced lightly, producing tones that were gentle yet filled with emotion. The contrast between the soft passages and the more powerful sections highlighted her versatility and control. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she played, knowing that the audience was experiencing not just the technical skill, but the heart behind the music. Each subtle nuance was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. As the performance progressed, she felt a growing sense of confidence. The earlier nerves and tension had transformed into a quiet assurance, connection with the instrument and the audience that was deeply satisfying. She had anticipated this moment for years, and now it was unfolding exactly as she had imagined. The music was no longer just a performance. It was a shared experience, a bridge between her inner world and the audience's perception. The transformation from doubt to respect was complete. Evident in the attentive faces and engaged posture of everyone present, the crescendo approached, demanding both technical mastery and emotional intensity. She felt her heartbeat align with the rhythm of the piece, a harmony that enhanced her focus and precision. Every note was deliberate, every phrase crafted to convey emotion and skill simultaneously. The audience was fully absorbed, responding instinctively to the ebb and flow of the music. Some closed their eyes, some leaned forward, and others simply sat in silent admiration. The energy in the room had shifted completely. No longer a space of judgment, but of shared appreciation for the art she was creating in the final moments before the climax. She allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had led her here. The years of practice, the moments of self-doubt, perseverance through challenges, and the quiet victories all came together in this performance. The music had become a vessel for her story, communicating what words could not. She realized that the respect she was earning was not just from the audience, but also from herself. For having remained dedicated, authentic, and patient throughout her journey, the climactic passage demanded both strength and sensitivity. She played with precision, allowing the emotion to guide her interpretation. Each note resonated, filling the room with a rich tapestry of sound. The audience responded with subtle but noticeable reactions like gasps, quiet hums of appreciation, and attentive postures that reflected the depth of engagement. The earlier mockery and doubt had vanished, replaced entirely by recognition and respect. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that her efforts had transformed perception and touched those listening as she approached the final notes. She allowed a subtle flourish, combination of technical skill and expressive nuance that highlighted the culmination of the piece. The audience remained silent, fully absorbed in the performance. She felt the music reaching its natural conclusion, every note carrying the weight of her journey and the emotion she intended to convey. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, recognizing the completion of something remarkable. The transformation from doubt to respect was now fully realized, and she experienced a quiet sense of triumph that was deeply personal and profoundly satisfying. The final note resonated, lingering in the hall with a clarity and depth that left a lasting impression. She held it for a moment, savoring the connection it created, the energy it carried, and the acknowledgement it represented. The audience, now fully attentive, absorbed the resonance. Many leaning back in silent appreciation, others with eyes glistening from the emotional impact. She lowered her instrument carefully, feeling the vibrations fade and the stillness settle over the room. In that moment, she realized the true power of authenticity, perseverance, and dedication, the ability to transform perception and earn respect through the sincerity of effort and expression. She stepped back slightly, taking a deep breath and allowing herself to absorb the atmosphere. The journey from being underestimated to commanding attention had been long and difficult, but it was reflected in the audience's transformation. The respect she had earned was tangible, visible in the engaged faces, attentive postures, and subtle expressions of admiration. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only performed but had also conveyed her story, her struggles, and her triumphs through music. The experience was a testament to the power of patience, dedication, and authenticity, a reminder that true respect is earned and cannot be fabricated. The music had ended, but its impact lingered in the air, a testament to the journey she had undertaken and the transformation she had inspired. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the performance had been more than just notes. It had been a reflection of her growth, resilience, and unwavering dedication. The room, once filled with skepticism and mockery, now held an energy of respect and admiration. She had not only played music, she had changed perceptions, leaving a lasting impression that would remain long after the final note had faded. She stood on the stage, letting the last vibrations of her instrument fade into the air. The hall was quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that follows something extraordinary. Then the applause began, slow at first, hesitant, as if people were testing the reality of what they had just witnessed. Gradually, it grew louder, and more insistent, filling the room with warmth and appreciation. Some stood immediately, clapping and cheering, their faces reflecting genuine admiration. Others remained seated, their eyes wide, absorbing the performance they had initially doubted. The young woman felt a swell of emotion, but she stayed composed. Savoring the acknowledgement without allowing it to define her, the journey to this moment had been long. She remembered the first time she had faced mockery, the whispers and smirks that had accompanied her presence. She thought of all the hours she had spent alone, the nights of practice that had gone unnoticed, the small victories she had celebrated quietly. And now, standing here, the respect she had earned was tangible, present in the faces of everyone around her. It was not a superficial recognition, it was rooted in genuine appreciation for her dedication, her skill, and the authenticity of her expression. She lowered her instrument carefully, the familiar weight in her hands now feeling lighter, almost as if it shared in the relief and triumph she felt. She could see some audience members wiping away tears, moved by the depth and emotion of the music. Others were smiling, nodding in quiet acknowledgement. The skepticism that had once lingered in their eyes replaced with a deep, silent respect. The change was subtle, but unmistakable, a testament to the transformative power of art and perseverance. A few performers, who had previously whispered and laughed, approached her cautiously. Their expressions were a mix of awe and apology, as if the performance had revealed a truth they could no longer ignore. One of them offered a small, sincere smile, and she nodded in return, acknowledging the unspoken reconciliation. There was no need for words. The music had spoken on her behalf. It had conveyed not just her skill, but her journey, her resilience, and the dedication that had brought her here. The applause continued, growing in intensity, filling her with a profound sense of fulfillment. She had always known that respect could not be demanded, that it could only be earned through consistent effort, authenticity, and courage. Tonight, that respect had been achieved, not through boasting or confrontation, but through the quiet power of her craft. The realization brought a sense of peace, a recognition that the journey itself had been as important as the outcome.